So let's assume for a moment you've been running around New World. Let's assume New World is either your first MMO or you came here from another MMO. I play Final Fantasy XIV, Guild Wars, World of Warcraft, and New World. Let's assume you came from Guild Wars, Final Fantasy, or in this case, World of Warcraft. And you are wondering, is there any reason that I should not hop into Dragonflight? What would stop me from hopping into Dragonflight? And is it going to be worth it on the other end? Am I really going to have a valuable experience? Because obviously in New World, you only paid 20 to 40 bucks to get into this game, and you're getting access to everything. Their newest zones, their mutator system down here with all the different dungeon modifications. You've got all these different weapons to mess with. You've got crafters and gatherers. You've got a ton to do. So what is going on in Dragonflight? Is it just more of every expansion that they've ever released? So is it worth returning to? And if New World is the kind of game you've really kind of grown to like, maybe you came here from different genres of games. Maybe New World got you in from Elden Ring, because some people say it reminds them of that. Maybe New World got you in from Destiny, because I think that a lot of the loot systems really mirror that. And so this is kind of acting as the bridge to the more traditional definition of an MMORPG, because World of Warcraft has been a big definer of what people have expected out of the genre, good and bad, for the last well over 10 years. It's been since 2004. We are coming up on 20 years of World of Warcraft defining a lot of what an MMORPG starts as, and New World is a little bit different. So, we've got New World here, and I've got Guild Wars up here just in case it comes up, and I've got World of Warcraft, and they're all running at the same time. Dragonflight is the newest expansion of World of Warcraft. It takes place on the Dragon Isles, which has its own story told through a campaign quest. This is very, very similar to the New World quest series, except that it is not optional. Dragonflight's story is not optional. This is something they tried out in Shadowlands. This is the second time making it like that. BFA before Shadowlands, once you got to a certain point, the war campaign wasn't optional, but you could do a lot of choosing along the way before you kind of got onto that train track. When you look at New World, the campaign is optional, but you're going to want to do it eventually. They have already, with the game being less than 2 years old, gone back and started voicing what they call their main story quest. So you have these big objectives, and you want to kind of do these as you go. And so I can get to it whenever I feel like it. There's a lot of rewards for getting to it, so you absolutely want to get to it, but I can get to it whenever I'm ready. So if I got into the game and a friend says, do you want to come do this thing with me, and I'm high enough level for that, I can go do that. So if I just grind my way up to 30 and I'm messing around in Brightwood, and then a friend who's just getting into the game is back in Everfall, I can hop down here and join them. No big deal. And so in many, many ways, that is closer to something like Guild Wars that doesn't care when you get to story. You can get to the story whenever you want. I can even do the different expansions out of order if I want. They do not care. Returning or being new to World of Warcraft, that is just not the case. To get into the game as a returning player, you will have to clear the story of the Dragon Isles. And as a new player, if you want to clear the story of the Dragon Isles, you cannot start it until you are level 60, which means you are going to have to go through what they call their new player experience. You will start on a tiny little island called Exile's Reach. You will level to, I believe, level 10. If you are familiar with MMORPGs, it'll probably take you somewhere around a half hour to an hour. If you've never played an MMO in your life, then it will probably take you a couple hours to fumble through, because its objective is to teach you. World of Warcraft is going to have to teach you all sorts of things. We're assuming today you're coming from something that is drastically different, like New World, because the combat system is a tab target system, which means I push the button tab and it selected something. And so if I press tab and I were to shoot a fireball at that thing with my class, that fireball would hit or miss determined on the game. How hard it hits determined on the game. I don't have to aim it. It just hits. And so if I run out in the world and I hit Moonfire, it's an instant thing within 40 yards. It can basically hit something that's literally behind my character. It can shoot out the back of my head and just hit them with this moon ability. It does not care. And so that makes the game feel very, very different from a combat perspective, because to add complexity to combat, you have to have big rotations of abilities. What happens if you hit buttons in certain orders? And so if I hit Berserk, this causes things like reduces cooldowns. And so then abilities that I would typically use maybe on cooldown, you know, such as Skull Bash, which is on a 15-second cooldown, if that were to be reduced, maybe I could Skull Bash more often. And so, or I have things like Iron Fur that uses Rage, which is generated when I'm in combat. And so my rage here is something that I'm managing as a resource, very similar to mana in a lot of games, but not every class in World of Warcraft uses mana. So not every class generates its kind of currency different. Rage, when I'm out of combat, falls away. So you can see it's just slowly falling off. I can store up to 100, but you can see it's dipping down to 0 because I'm not angry about anything. So I need to go out and get angry. So learning the combat system is something that Exile's Reach is designed to teach you, assuming you know nothing. It assumes you know nothing. Now, if you are somebody that plays either our very lovely Guild Wars or our very lovely New World, you might be playing one of those on Steam. Steam allows these games both to be played with a controller. That controller is used through the Steam UI. It is not native in either game, which means there are flaws to the system, but ultimately controller support is enabled. If you are opting into World of Warcraft does not offer controller support through Steam because the game is not offered through Steam, but it does offer controller support. That is brand new. You're going to have to Google how to do it. I'm not your guy. It's there. It's something they are getting better at. They have like an action target system and all these things that are designed to make the game more accessible. But a lot of that is something that has been added piece by piece over the last couple expansions, which means it is still lacking. It's on the way. So controller support is limited. Let's assume you make it out of Exile's Reach. You're happy with the control scheme. You're happy learning tab targeters, or you're a returning player and you're wondering what all this even means. Well, depending on when you took a break, you may not be level 60 because they have level squished us down at some point. And so depending on where you left off in the game, you're going to come back. You're going to be whatever level you were relative to the total experience curve, and you need to get to level 60. As a new player, you are going to have to do that through the Battle for Azeroth expansion, where the Alliance will be leveling mostly on Kul Tiras, and the Horde will be leveling mostly on Zandalar. From there, you have the option to, if you want, dip over to Shadowlands or anything like that, but you should be able to, within BFA, hit 60 and immediately charge into the Dragon Isles. If you are a returning player and want to start a fresh character, so you are somewhere in between, picking up where you left off, and the new player experience I just described, you will start on Exile's Reach, and then through our very lovely time traveler Chromie, you will have the ability to pick whatever expansion you want and level through it. They are all the same level now. They all scale with you in the open world, which means that if I go out in the world and I am level 35, all of the monsters that I fight will be level 35. The moment I ding 36, the zone will level up with me. And through Chromie time, it's largely meant so that you can just quest your way through the zone and have a blast. So if there's an expansion that you really miss, you can go back and do it again. If there's an expansion you always wish you'd played, you could level through that. There are optimized leveling paths out there that also cause you to maybe jump timelines throughout. And so you can level up. The game is not wildly account-wide yet, but they are getting better. So you'll have the access to things like all your mounts and all that very, very early on. And so you should have a great leveling experience. Their heirloom system actually allows you to pull up all this gear. So you should have access to reasonable gear as soon as you establish some heirlooms. So the active leveling alts is good, which is something you don't need to worry about in New World. And it's not nearly as good as what Guild Wars can do. Guild Wars, everything I do that I want to be account-wide is account-wide. And so when I go in and I work on things like leveling up my masteries, these are all account-wide. And when I jump over to games like New World, it's all one character. So it's like Final Fantasy, where it just handles itself. Unfortunately, that does mean in the handful of circumstances where you do create a second character, there's a lot of pain points there in both Final Fantasy and New World because the devs simply didn't account for those because they assumed every player would have exactly one character. And the moment somebody chooses to add 2 or more, obviously that's going to make certain parts very, very tedious because they just never assumed you had alts. World of Warcraft is getting better about assuming that you have some alts. And Dragonflight is no exception. So to returning and new players, what happens when you hit max level? I've done my campaign quest, I'm max level. I don't necessarily want to worry about the gear grind and all the end game that makes every MMO feel a little bit different, but also a lot alike. I'm ready to level in alt. Well, effectively, there's a couple of things going on that make this expansion unique. Every expansion within World of Warcraft has some unique systems. One of the big ones that we saw, especially Guild Wars players that are familiar with it, is dragon flying. Dragon riding is something that is an account-wide unlock, and I can upgrade this so all of my characters have fully upgraded dragons the moment they land in the Isles, and this creates a unique travel system and is the only mount that you can ride in the air within this expansion, and it allows you to kind of fly around really rapidly. It's honestly, I find it fun. You can't use it back in old expansions. It is unique to this expansion. And that is one of the big iconic things. It may be the thing you saw in the trailer that you got really excited about. As a new player, it's going to be handed to you very, very rapidly when you come into the Dragon Isles. And as a returning player, it's only tied to those. So if you like it, that's where it's at. If you don't like it, don't worry, that's where it's at. And if you're somebody that likes to level alts, it will be available to all of them. This expansion, they are also doubling down on their reputation system. Within New World, you are tied to one of 3 factions. And so that is something that you deal with a lot, is progressing your faction, dealing with your faction. However, each individual area also has territory standings. So each of the zones is a territory, and these territories all have levels, and as you level them, you get to pick different perks, such as maybe you're a little faster at gathering in that area, or you can store a little more in your bank in that area, or you gain experience faster within that area. And so there are different things that move as your standing rises within these territories, but you don't carry any of that territory standing with you when you move zone to zone to zone. Within World of Warcraft, that's going to work a little bit differently this time around. In the past, we've had typical traditional faction grinds where you grind your way to Exalted, mostly through the act of doing repetitive tasks over and over and over. There have also been a series of dailies that are very grindy. Don't worry, those are every 3.5 days now, so you effectively just need to play kind of twice a week to stay largely caught up with how most of the game works now. There's a handful of things that were left daily because they make sense, but as people ask for some of the bad habits of the past to go daily, so far the devs have been resistant to that, and I think that's very, very healthy. A lot of it is tied to something called Renown. Renown is effectively a New World territory standing. This is also what something like Guild Wars would tie to your mastery system. So within this, we have these 4 factions, and you will notice that we have 4 zones. Valdrassus, Azure Span, Honoron Plains, and Waking Shore, which are unlocked in exactly opposite of the order I just named them. Start in Waking Shore, move to Honoron, off to Azure Span, and to Valdrassus. With alts, you can level in them in whatever option you want. They don't care. The scaling system kicks in. But your first time through, you're following the story, and the story makes sense if you start here. This is the new starting zone for the new race, so ignore that. So as I go through and do these weeklies, they have timers on them. This one has 3 days and 17 hours left. And so that is my weekly, and the rest of these are on these various 3.5 day kind of increments. And so they kind of rotate, and you want to do those as well as anything that you unlock, because you actually get more and more ways to move through Renown. Renown is a system that basically tracks experience that you've contributed towards that group's objectives. And so within the Dragon Scale Expedition, for example, there are all these Renown levels, and they move up to either 25 or 30 depending on the faction. It would not shock me if they update this throughout the expansion, but what is exciting about this is a lot of the things that it unlocks are account-wide unlocks. So if it unlocks something like a cosmetic for your dragon, that's an account-wide unlock. So when an alt gets to that level, it's not really going to reward anything. It also has things that are just called account unlock, the ability to kind of gain reputations with these groups, have different dailies. A lot of these steps are account wide, and so you don't feel any pressure to come back just to get level 11 on each of your characters if the animal specialist is something you want, which will allow you to acquire gray Memoroni and black skitterbug battle pets. You can do that on any of your characters as soon as you have this on any of them. So why would I level Renown at all with multiple? Each of these, they are actually kind of themed to the zones. This feels like Waking Shores, Honoran, Azure Span, and Thaldraszus, but there are things you can sometimes do that benefit them all over the world. So it doesn't feel like I can only level Dragon Scale by being in Waking Shores. So if I don't want to spend all my time in Waking Shores, my Dragon Scale expedition will still move up. But when I'm on my main character, every time I hit an increment of 10, level 10 or level 20, that changes the way my alts level, because each of these also have things like the ability to buy specific specific equipment, which would move your item level up. So they don't necessarily want alts just instantly getting access to the highest item level available from the rep gear, just in case that rep gear becomes really good. They want to kind of slow you down there, as well as anything that is like a profession related thing. So if you want a recipe for your weaver, or your tailor, who is a mage, you might need to level up your mage within one of the factions to get access to a tailoring recipe, because your main is not a tailor. So what happens on the 10s and the 20s is you get word of a worthy ally. At level 10, all of your other characters that you currently have or will ever have will gain 100% extra reputation every time they gain reputation with that same faction to level 10. Once you are level 20, they will now gain 100% extra reputation to level 20, and now 200% extra reputation to level 10, which really encourages you to feel rewarded for doing your grind primarily on one character. Once you get it done once, you're kind of done forever. I kind of wish it'd been fully account-wide, period, and they didn't do that. They've done some other things that are more account-wide. Your weekly progression is something that's more account-wide. The upcoming trading post system added next year is going to be more account-wide. So they've done some things that are moving to where, like, if I want to complete a portion of this week's objectives on my first class and another portion on a second class, I can do that. But ultimately, it feels like a step in the right direction towards alt friendliness. It's not going to fix it all in one go, but after years of people complaining that they make all the alts do all the same things in World of Warcraft, this is a step in the right direction. Limiting us to 4 factions, but not like Shadowlands tying us to one of the 4 factions, means I can progress all 4 on any one character, and then any other characters can largely ignore this system until they need it. And then my max level characters ideally past level 10, or better yet, even past level 20, so that my alts will move up very, very, very rapidly. So I think this is good. I think they could still afford to do better, but that's something you're going to be chasing within expansion-specific systems. So as you go out through the world, you might find yourself chasing various rare spawns, leveling up through the different battle pet optional systems, pushing through Mythic Plus, their hard dungeon system, or their raids, messing around in PvP, open world, or in the different various battlegrounds. There are lots of ways to play this game, and it feels like it is a game that helps benefit from exploration. It feels like they are encouraging you to just get into the Dragon Isles and play the way you want. Lots of it drops reasonable gear, and then as you work up the gear curve, it gets a little bit stricter at each stage. By the time you hit the max stage, it starts to feel much like you're back in something like New World, and you are above level 600, and the 600 to 625 grind is a little more specific than everything up to that point. So the gear grind is absolutely there, but only if you want it. If you don't want to go any higher than that, don't worry about it. The game will feed it to you. So as you push into the game and you finish getting to max level, it's easier than ever to get into alts. It's very, very fast to level in World of Warcraft now. The world record going from 10 to 60, I believe, is 3.5 hours. I just casually dabbled on a character to 60, and I believe it took me like 14 or 16 or something like that. So it's very fast to get into Dragonflight relative to how long we spend in MMORPGs. But the new player experience is something that every game constantly needs to worry about. New World is already worried about their new player experience, and they are less than 2 years old. World of Warcraft is worried about it, and Guild Wars is worried about it. They're all worried about it. You want to constantly make it easy to hop in. So I think World of Warcraft is very, very easy to learn. If nothing else, it's one of those games that's iconic. There's a lot of references to it. So it would be a great set of context. So if you ever get to the point that you're caught up in whatever game you play, New World or otherwise, and you feel like you want to take a breather and play something else, but you like MMORPGs, World of Warcraft is absolutely one that you could give a shot. And so I would absolutely say hop in, give it a go. You only pay for the months you want to use. As soon as you decide you want to leave, just unsubscribe and you're good. It is a monthly subscription, and that is something that, compared to the other 2 games that I pulled up today, is a little bit hard to swallow. You don't have to buy very much. They let you, there is a free trial. It's fairly limited. Once you get past the free trial, you basically just pay your subscription each month, kind of like a gym membership, and then you shut it off whenever you want. No big deal. It's all cloud saved settings and stuff, so you can come as go as you please as you install. The native UI has gotten better than ever before, so the number of add-ons and stuff that you have running, I do have add-ons running right now. This is an add-on, for example. Moving my map down here, I've modified it in a way that's an add-on. So like I've done some things that are add-ons, but a lot of it has gotten very, very, very easy to manage and come and go as you please. So is it worth hopping over to World of Warcraft from something like New World or Guild Wars? Can I even try World of Warcraft? Can I just dabble in World of Warcraft? The answer is absolutely yes. All MMORPGs will take as much time as you will give them. They will absolutely suck all of the time out of your life if that's your goal. But within World of Warcraft, I think it's very good. I think if you want to try a tab target game with a ton of content tied to it, both current and past, World of Warcraft is a perfectly valid option alongside other games that have been around this long. Final Fantasy XIV is my primary MMO, and it is absolutely worth hopping in and giving it a shot.